Hello, guys. Seems we're the only ones here. Oh, wait a little
Hello,
bit.
good afternoon. Afternoon.
Afternoon, everyone. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Very well.
I'll just give it like another 5 minutes for people to join because I see we are the only ones. So let's wait and see. Yeah. Suppose we end up just being us.
Oh, I mean,
Right?
it is what it is.
Oh, Asad, did you say we just get started? Okay. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome. My name is Kabaso. I'm from the African Center for the Study of the US here at Wits University. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar to explore the role of race in the 2024 US presidential campaign. This is the first of weekly series that we shall be hosting here at the African Center for the Study of the US at WITS to really just help us unpack and make sense of the meaning of the US elections for Africa, be it a Kamala or Trump presidency. So we thought that, as we approach the election, the influence of race on political discourse is quite significant. And today we want to explore how racial identity shapes voter behavior, voter mobilization, policy debates, campaign strategies, and all that in this pivotal election. I'm excited today to guide our discussion with two panel of experts. I'm joined by Dr. Blair Proctor and Dr. Asad El Malik, who will help us to unpack this topic today. I'll just introduce them briefly. Dr. Proctor is an assistant professor of African history in the Department of Black Studies, State University of New York. He is also a Fulbright scholar here in South Africa, Institutional Review Board primary investigator for a project titled Westbury Rising, Promoting Yourself, CEO of Your Lives for the Makings of a Better Community. Dr. Proctor is also a research associate with our center, the Center for the Study of the US here at WITS. And then our other panelist is Dr. Asad El Malik, who is the manager of the Diaspora Project here at the Center for the Study of the US. He holds a PhD in intercultural relations from Columbia International University, and he's also the author of 2 books, Bismillah and Bin Pais, How African Americans Crafted an Islamic Expression Through Nationalism. His forthcoming book, Find Home Again, delves into the intersection of identity, race, and the concept of home. His work also explores, focuses on fostering connections between African Americans and the African continent, bridging cultural and historical gaps. So to just start us off, Blair and Asad, I'll just ask very briefly for you to just tell us, what this moment means for the US. Just briefly, maybe 5 minutes or less. I'll start with Asad.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm excited to have this discussion, especially with my Axis crew as well as my my brother, Dr. Proctor. As we look at this moment, it is indeed a historic moment for many reasons. Obviously, the issue of race is most germane to today's topic. However, the implications of gender loom large. Additionally, there's this feeling that this is a pivotal election for the United States in its experiment with democracy. Since 2008, in my opinion, the United States has been kind of 2 countries drifting apart. One is whiter, older, wealthier, Christian, and Trump was able to seize this constituency and exploit their fears that were heightened with the election of Barack Obama, something that they perceived as a threat. So Trump became their voice, kind of the voice of white backlash, and he has maintained and in many ways grown this constituency. The other is a browner, younger, liberal, and they have a different vision of the country. And Vice President Harris is trying her best to speak to this group while still maintaining kind of the establishment politics. And obviously there's this symbolism of having this a Black woman as the head of the American experiment. To many people, this is beautiful. To many others, it may be grotesque, but she does represent a departure from the past. So we will kind of find out in November how the American people have decided, which direction the American people have decided to go, not only with this election, but with the future of the country.
Yeah, I would definitely echo Dr. Assad with this in terms of how this election between Harris and Trump is unprecedented in a lot of ways, especially due to, I would say, as you said, Brother Assad earlier, within 2008, I would argue when Obama came into office, the United States was becoming a lot more racist overt in terms of how Obama was treated, especially his wife, Michelle Obama, in terms of things like the Obama waffles, referring to Michelle Obama as the ape in heels, Obama chia pet, like all of these tropes that were, a lot of folks will say that Trump was bringing that in, but I believe that a lot of white America simply just could not see a Black family as a representative of the United States vision and aesthetic. And I think now fast forwarding to 2024, and with this upcoming election in November, I don't know, quick question. Did everyone see the debate last night?
In part.
I mean, when we talk about, just in terms of just what Harris, all I have to say is that she ate and came with receipts. But all that to say is that I believe and we'll get more into the discussions later on today with Project 2025 and things of that nature. I'm seeing a pivot in America, and I'm speaking specifically within the context of Black America, where there are divisions into questioning Harris's Blackness, or is she a full representative as a Black woman within the United States of America. But partly my fear is really not about questioning her identity, but it's more so, if Trump comes into office, what does that mean for Black America, period? So I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Those joining us online, please feel free to type your questions in the chat, and then we'll, after our first series of questions, we'll take those questions that you may have. I'd like to pose a question. Well, I'll start with Asad to respond, and then Blair can go next. We saw Donald Trump attended the National Association of Black Journalists some time back at the conference and made a controversial remark about Vice President Kamala Harris's race, implying that she just became Black. And many considered this a low moment, even for Trump. Why do you think questions about Harris's racial identity, continue to persist? And maybe a follow-up to that is, in what ways does, her racial identity help or hinder her in this political arena in her pursuit for the White House? And as you answer that, I also just want you to reflect also on, like you said, yesterday's presidential debate. We saw that Trump seems to backpedal a little bit on those remarks. So just also reflect on that. I will start with Asad.
So race is the forever present issue in the United States, whether it's campaigning, whether it is governance, whether it's schools, education. Race is as American as apple pie, right? It is a part of the discussion at all the time. So I think with Trump's comment at the National Association of Black Journalists Conference, it was his attempt to otherize her. It was dog whistle politics, right? It is to point out, number one, that there's this Black identity that exists, that she just became Black, but also there's another sentiment there. White Americans may be used to a lot of Black people. We've been in the country since the very beginning. We're about 50 good years outside of the start of integration. But white Americans may not, he may not be able to use her Blackness to otherize her. So he was using her Indianness, right? The fact that her mother is Asian or an Indian woman, to kind of otherize her, using that, again, those dog whistle politics, using the language of she just became Black, signaling to many in white America, or his constituency, I should say, many in her constituency, that she is a part of this new group. These are foreigners. These are people who are not a part of the fabric of America. We've had the Black people here for a long time, to kind of paraphrase what he's saying, but she is this new other. So I think there was another level. It was anti-Black, but it was also anti-immigrant in its language. But if you look at last night, although he attempted to backtrack, he said, I don't care whether she's Black or Indian or whatever, right? But that was only after race had already come up in his very first response to the questions. So again, race looms large in this discussion. This goes back to that first country, that older, whiter, Christian, wealthier country. At one time, they were called the silent majority, and now he is their voice. And Kamala, Vice President Harris, I should say, doesn't fit into their landscape of what America should be in terms of aesthetically.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when he talked about Kamala just becoming Black. You could hear from the audience that was there. They're like, "What the hell?" Like just this. But then when you think about the history of Trump, then it makes sense, right? He's going to say something stupid. And it's trying to, I find it that he was trying to find a way to maybe get the Black voter to cause division, maybe within the Black community. And for me, when it comes to this concept of Kamala just becoming Black, or this idea of questioning her Blackness, I've not around the circles that I have around Black people that I know, including my family and friends. When she first came, when I first, when she would start coming out to becoming more known in the public sphere, I always saw her aesthetically as a Black woman. Like I didn't know that she was Indian until much later when it started coming out. And it's interesting if you look at her history, especially the fact that she was born in Oakland, so she was born in America, and also the period of time of when she was born. So she was born in 1964. And I did a little bit of research on her parents. And her mother came to the United States to pursue her graduate studies at the University of California, Berkeley in 1958. Kamala's father came around 1961. They met around 62 and got married in 63. And it's interesting, if you know the history of the West Coast, particularly the Bay Area, in terms of Oakland, that's where the Black Panther Party was founded, with Hugh P. Newton and Bobby Seale in 1966. And interestingly enough, Kamala's mother was very close friends with Mary Lewis, who, along with the late Dr. Nathan Hare, founded Black Studies. So to me, I find it very interesting of who her mother's social group was. And then for her to marry a Black Jamaican man in the early 1960s. So even though, yes, she's still Indian from India, but I still think it's an interesting context of Kamala's background and what we know later in terms of where she went to school, HBCU, at Howard University, and then later becoming an AKA, and then also being a member of the Lynx. So again, this question of her Blackness is just very odd to me. And within the United States context, and historically, if we start gatekeeping who's Black, then there's going to be a lot of people who I used to think were Black, like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Jacobs, Solomon Northup, all these folks who wrote the slave narrative, so they're not Black anymore. Halle Berry, Boris Kodjoe, Jasmine Guy, Tamia. So you got a lot of folks who are very affiliated with the African-American community who a lot of folks are starting to say now are not Black. Mariah Carey, prime examples. And for me, it's really not what white America thinks. For me, I'm looking at what Black folks are saying. And I'm also noticing that I've seen this quote unquote diaspora wars, that we talk about, between continental Africans, between African Americans, also between Caribbean folks, and maybe also Afro-Latinos, within these last, I'd say, 15 to 20 years. Because growing up as a kid in the South Side of Chicago, Black Americans just meant, or being Black was, your family came from the South and you went up doing the Great Migration. So over time, that has changed, right? And you have seen now, I'd say within the last maybe 15, 20 years, where you have Black Americans who might, or who affiliate or who identify as Black American, but might have had parents or grandparents that came from continental Africa or came from the Caribbean, who are now in their 20s and 30s now that have this view that might not necessarily know the historical context of the Winthrop Rule, things of that nature. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Leenda Sad. Thank you for just stressing us the history of Kamala. At least now, well, we know that she is biracial. You've told us she's her dad her mother is Indian, the dad is from Jamaica. So we know she's biracial, much like former President Obama. So her father was an immigrant. She was raised by a non-Black mother, similar to Obama. Were there any similar questions about Obama's Blackness during his campaign or administration? Why or why not, would you say? Again, we'll start with Asad and then Blake.
Okay, great. No problem. I think Dr. Proctor pointed out something very interesting. It was really during this, excuse me, during the Obama administration that these kind of questions of Black identity began to, or Black Americans really started having a new discussion around Black identity. So during Obama's campaign, I can't recall any questions really of significance about his Blackness. I think partly he was shielded because he was married to an African-American woman, and she had this lineage is the language, right? She had this lineage. She is a descendant of African-American. She's a descendant of slaves that deeply rooted. I'm sure somewhere in her family, they come from Mississippi or Tennessee before they were in Chicago, right? So she has the traditional Black American story. In addition to that, Obama attended Jeremiah Wright's Trinity United Methodist Church, which is deeply steeped in the Black liberation theology. So it wasn't just a Black church; it was a church with a very specific reading of the Bible and its implications for Black people, for oppressed people. And then, as Dr. Proctor pointed out recently, Obama was known in the community as a community organizer in Chicago, in the Black communities of Chicago. So whereas there was this, he had a wife, I think his credentials, right, to be invited to the cookout, this ethical cookout that Black Americans have. I think he had all of these other credentials. As it relates to Vice President Harris, it's a bit different, she has a Jamaican father, and Jamaicans are truly also descendants of slaves, or the Afro-Jamaicans are descendants of the transatlantic slave trade. But they have a different culture, different experience, different worldview than someone born in Mississippi, Tennessee, Louisiana, my home state. So our experiences within the confines of the United States obviously create some levels of separation. And then there is her mother. Her mother is obviously Indian. So there's a harder time to connect to that lineage. However, to Dr. Proctor's point, she did so through life experience. So here's what I mean. She's born in 1964. She's 4 years old when Martin Luther King died. She's in the Black side of Oakland, right, California. This has to have an impact around her mother's Black friends, her mother herself. She goes to a Black university, the Mecca of Black universities, Howard University. She pledges a Black sorority. So there is this, through her life experience, an attempt to connect with that lineage, not with her Blackness, but with the lineage of your old diaspora, as we call them, those who are descendants of American slaves. So there's an attempt to connect herself to that lineage. And I'm not saying it's a disingenuous way. It was a disingenuous connection. I'm saying that was her natural progression. She was perceiving the world as a Black person, and she was being perceived by the world as a Black person. So she went the traditional way of African Americans. I hope I'm being clear with that.
Yeah, I would add to your point that I would also wonder what would, so I'm a geographer, so I look at space and time, place, and space. I wonder if Obama was running now, would there be more questions of his biracialness as opposed to back in 2008? And I think there would be, because I think in hindsight, there has been a lot of folks who debate or question, was Barack Obama really, the first Black president, or was he the first biracial president? Especially when a lot of Black Americans started realizing that he was not the president of Black America, but the president of the United States of America. Because if you remember, his sell was, when he was running for president, is that I have a white mother from Kansas and I have an African father from Kenya. And he also played on that idea of being this global citizen, right? Because he grew up in Hawaii, which is an island, still part of the United States, but still an island, not on the mainland, raised by his white side of the family. But he also had a very interesting mother who was an anthropologist. She was an educator and she was a PhD scholar. And her, first relationship was with Obama's father from Kenya, who was an educator as well. They met in college. And then after they split, her next relationship was with an Indonesian. So part of Obama's life was Hawaii and also Indonesia. So he had a very exotic, if you will, upbringing that was very different than, I would say, his wife, Michelle Obama's upbringing, growing up in the South Side of Chicago. And with Kamala, I feel like there's a similar type of exoticism in terms of her life, with that after her parents split, she lived in Montreal. That's where she went to high school. So she had a very global experience as well. And I think it has a lot to do with both Obama's experience and Kamala Harris's experience of having parents that were immigrants, of having that global lived experience. But I think also now with Kamala in particular, within this period of time where the Black community, I would argue, in the United States is very divided, you do have a lot of folks that are looking at her biracialness as, oh, is she really down for us? Also, what's stacked against her is her husband, who is a white Jewish man, which is different than with Obama, with his unambiguous Black wife and their children, right? So Kamala doesn't have any children. So all you see with Kamala is her who's, ambiguous, and then this white man. So you can see where a lot of Black folks, is she really down for us, or is she a sellout? But I would argue, just me personally, I don't see her as a sellout, just again, because of the historical context of her upbringing, and also she didn't have to go to an HBCU. She didn't have to join a Black sorority. She didn't, so I think when it comes to identity, with all of us, it can change over time due to your lived experiences, place, spaces, and travel. I'd even say personally for myself, had I just stayed in Southside Chicago, I would just have a Black identity. But because I have traveled and I've gone to other places and where my Blackness has been challenged or questioned, I have, also added another identity of that, in some spaces I am perceived as brown. And this, could pass as an Arab, or could pass as a Muslim, or could pass as, all these different things out of ignorance and not knowing.
Thank you, thank you. You raised an important question, but I would get to that, but I'll probably just say it in very brief terms. And Asad also alluded to this, how you mentioned that Kamala was raised Black, went to an HBCU. And I was just reflecting and thinking about how, is it how you feel or how people perceive you? So do people perceive her Black enough, or is it hard to say I am actually Black? Because I mean, if we're discussing issues of racial identity and race, those are some of the things we can talk about. Is it about how people perceive you or how you perceive yourself? So maybe we'll tackle this. Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
Well, so
yeah.
I'll definitely.
I think it is a combination of both, of how you view the world and how the world views you. Clarence Thomas, Chief Justice Clarence Thomas, has all of the credentials that would make him Black. He is the descendant of slaves. He is from the South. He knows that experience, but he doesn't perceive the world in the way that I perceive the world. Now, we cannot deny his Blackness. So there's right the world, because the world perceives him a certain way, but he does not perceive the world the way that I perceive the world. But there is no denying of this. And not only does he not see the world the way I perceive it, but the way the majority of Black Americans perceive the world. So so there is this kind of play that takes place, this balance. I'm sure Dr. Proctor can speak about Homer Plessy, who was at the time the language that they used was an octoroon. He was like 1/8 Black. However you decide that, I don't know how you decide it, but however you decide that this person is 1/8 Black to the world, he presented as a white man, but he had this 1/8 of Blackness in him, and that's why he challenged the system. He was saying that the system of racial segregation is foolish. Look at me, I look like a white man, but you're telling me that I need to, sit in the back of this bus or the back of this train. But Plessy, right? Although the world perceived him as probably a white man, he perceived himself, right, as a Black man navigating the world of racism and white supremacy. So there's definitely these kind of two components. And I think race is as a social construct, it's fragile, it is dynamic, it changes from country to country, city to city, right? Blair in my city, I'm from New Orleans, we have a Creole class of Black people who are generationally mixed. No one will perceive Dr. Proctor in my city as other than Black, because we have a group of people who identify as Black who look just like Blair, right? However, we know that race is different in Brazil, Colombia, here in South Africa. But in the American context, as it relates to this conversation, the two questions I have is, how does Kamala see the world, and how does the world see Kamala? I cannot answer that first question, but I'm 1000% sure that the world, at least the American world, views Kamala, her lived experience, before she's the vice president, before she's the attorney general in California, when she was just a woman walking down the street, a little girl going to the store, a high school student, having a crush on. So the world perceived her as a little Black girl. So I think that also will shape the way she perceived the world, and it is evident in the decisions that she made. She chose the HBCUs. She chose the black sororities, the Black sorority. I think this is very important. I don't think it's germane to whether someone should vote for her or not. Right? We want her policies. We want to see what her platform is, and how does that impact the people that she may identify with, right? As Black people, how will her policies impact Black people? Right. So, but I'll let Blair tap in.
Yeah. So, and I hope folks understand that when I speak, sometimes I speak in sarcasm. So when I say and be facetious of saying that I look Muslim, I'm not saying that I understand that Islam and Muslim is a religion, but I'm just saying that with living in a racialized world, people will conflate, sometimes religion with ethnicity. For example, someone will ask, I remember particularly in the United States, depending on where you are, a friend of mine asked me what was my nationality. And I said, well, my nationality is American. She's like, well, no, but where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from America. I was born in Michael Reese Hospital in Cook County, Chicago, Illinois. So I think that's a lot of it, as well as ignorance, again, of folks misconstruing nationality from ethnicity, race. Sometimes race and ethnicity can be intersectional, things of that nature. And also, as a trained sociologist, particularly when we talk about race, it definitely adds on to, usually is three ways how a person as an individual can be perceived. One, and first and foremost, is how you see yourself, which can change over time and due to lived experience. The second is how society writ large sees you aesthetically. And then the third is how the government classifies you. So literally from birth, at least in the United States, before you leave the hospital, you are going to be marked down by your race, your socialized gender, and who your parents are. That's just how it is. So your lived experiences and your life chances from the gate starts even before you're born. So, and when we talk about social constructions and things of that nature, they can change over time. So, for example, within the New Orleans context and within the South African context, especially within the apartheid systems, you had the Creole de Couleur, and then you had Black folks. So during the 17th, 18th century, there definitely was a division. But then after the Civil War ended, and during Reconstruction, and then with Homer Plessy that you brought up, Dr. Assad, again, it was, yes, he looked like a white man. However, it was him calling out his Blackness what led to his arrest. And then which led to separate but equal. And of course, the American apartheid system that we know of today. And similarly in South Africa, the mixed race or color category started in 1948 afterwards. There was no concept of a colored category before then. So again, it's how outsiders craft these social constructions of race that usually is for the betterment of maintaining white supremacy.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. I'll move to the next question real quick because I see we're getting some questions in the chat. We heard former President Trump and the Republican have referred to Vice President Kamala Harris as a DEI hire, diversity, equity, and inclusion, suggesting that she's unprepared for her position and is probably only there due to her race or gender, like trying to fulfill a certain quota. How do you think that such statements affect the electorate's perception of Harris?
I think at this point in the election, no one's really undecided, right? So, everyone has gone to their corners and they're just waiting to November to see who's going to come out to vote. Obviously, you still have your swing states, but and those swing voters who sometimes vote Republican, sometimes vote Democrat. But I think this is such a contrasting choice between two candidates that if you are still undecided, I'm not sure what much more you need to see from whatever political perspective you take, whether you're a Democrat and supporting Harris or whether you're a Republican and supporting Trump. I'm not sure what more you need to see. So I'm not sure how those statements like the DEI hire, I think early on when Vice President Harris, and I say early on, this is all in a matter of 2 months. Time moves so fast nowadays, right? We forget that a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, there was like an assassination attempt on the president, and now we're already talking about the debate last night, and it's kind of about the news. So at that time, about 2 months ago, when Harris became the nominee, the Republican Party, they were searching for some way to use this kind of dog whistle politics to kind of brand her, to blacken her, right? I even think of when I was growing up, I'm going to go on a tangent here. When I was growing up, and Minister Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam had the Million Man March. On Time magazine's cover, either Time or Newsweek, I don't want to misspeak, but they put a picture of Minister Farrakhan, who's a fair-skinned black man, but they had darkened him, right? The whoever took the photo and edited the photo made him very dark, very different from his hue, because there's this association of darkness with bad, right? The kind of basic association of darkness with bad. So I think this was a way of using language like DEI hire to dark.
Is Assad still there? Or could it be my network?
I don't know, but I can fill in.
Okay, sure.
With your question of DEI hire, we understand that terminology is not new. So dog whistle politics, as Assad explained earlier, goes back to slavery, especially when we discuss the concept of the term boy directed towards grown Black men that were enslaved. Or during Reaganomics, the term welfare queen, or criminal, thug, things of that nature, or super predator that Hillary Clinton made in terms of talking about Black male youth within the inner city. And now DEI hire is just another form of dehumanization. And frankly, racism. I would argue that DEI hire, it's another, all of these terminologies and dehumanizations is another word for the N-word. It's a way of otherizing and saying that she's not deserving of being in this position while she is a trained prosecutor, trained lawyer. She's educated and is very much presidential. This question of, is she presidential? And I think a lot of it has to do with intersectionality, right? And when I talk about intersectionality, I'm talking about the Kimberly Crenshaw Black feminist theory of intersectionality. So they're playing on both her race, of questioning her race, and then also her gender of being a woman. So absolutely. And I had a different answer, but after watching the debate, now it's kind of like the media is looking at what she clearly won the debate. Now, you might not agree with everything about her politics and all that, but in terms of her positionality versus his, I don't think you really should question if she's a DEI hire now at this point.
Yeah, I think it's Dr. Proctor, and I'm sorry, my internet acted up a little bit, but I think it's interesting. After watching the debate, what I realized was that Vice President Harris and Donald Trump are speaking to those two Americas. They're speaking to two different Americas, right? And Donald Trump spoke to his constituency last night. The bullying type of politics, the kind of lowbrow kind of brand of speaking that he has, and she spoke to her constituency, or she spoke to that other America. Yeah, definitely, if you are part of, depending on what part of America you are in, it was either a win either way. I don't think President Trump, former President Trump, performed exceptionally well last night. He was much better against his debate against Biden. Because of that prosecutorial edge that Vice President has, I don't think he was ready for her ability to respond and retort and to have her talking points, boom, 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 bam, 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 as I would say, so ready for the trigger. However, I do think if I am someone who's already a Trump supporter, again, I don't believe that anyone is still on the fence, still undecided. I just can't understand what are you looking for at this point. But if I was a Trump supporter, I hear Trump speaking of immigration, and we have to understand that scares that older, whiter, Christian, wealthy America, and he spoke to that. He He even went as far as to use some very racist tropes. He said that some immigrants were eating dogs and cats. This is, but he is speaking to that as repulsed as we may have been to hear that language, it resonated with millions of Americans who are part of that America that Trump is now leading.
I'm so glad you brought that point up, and I loved how Harris was just her response was just the shade. She was just laughing like she's like poor thing, you need some help. And also if you noticed, I also liked how you brought up that basically both former President Trump and Vice President Harris are talking to polarized America, the two Americas, the tale of two cities, as you said. And just in terms of positionality and how Trump refused to look at her. Like he refused to acknowledge her presence, which to me is a silent racism, as far as I'm concerned, and a silent disrespect, right? And how she was straight up just saying, I have the receipts. I travel. They talk about you. They will eat you for lunch in terms of, of talking about what Putin would do. So it was just really interesting in terms of the confidence that she had. And I think also it plays on the trope that every Black family is told that you are going to have to work 10 times as harder just to maybe try to get to even. Trust me, she had to do a lot of prep, a lot of practice, and Trump is able to come in being below mediocre and sloppy as usual. And even you noticed how with the debate, he was allowed to keep on talking. And Vice President Harris had to ask, hey, can I expand on my point? And the moderator said no. So that tells you already the structural racism there.
And I'm so glad not to make this conversation about the debate. What I did appreciate from Vice President Harris, there was one point in the debate where she wanted to respond about fracking in Pennsylvania, and they wouldn't let her respond, but she held that response until it was her turn to speak again, and she addressed it. And what I thought what that showed is that she respected the rules of the debate, but she was not going to allow Trump to bully her and push a false narrative without presenting a counter narrative. So I really appreciated that, because as we talk about these discussions about, is she presidential, right? What does that mean? George Bush was a C student, right? So we talk about, is she presidential? One of the things we think is like, is she strong enough to stand up to maybe a Putin in a room, or to whatever other rogue dictator, I don't want to call Putin a rogue dictator, but whomever. And she showed last night that she wouldn't be bullied by our rogue politician, right? So so I really appreciated her ability to, and I thought that was very presidential of her ability to respect the rules, but also to engage and not be bullied by Donald Trump. Trump, as we talk about, his campaign has been the bully of the Republican Party and then the bully of the Democratic Party. He bullied, Republican establishment from the Bushes, Jeb Bush, and the Mitt Romneys, and all of these establishment candidates who thought they were in line to be president. He bullied them. He bullied Nikki Haley and Hillary Clinton. So this time, I think he met someone who was able, or who was prepared to respond to his bullying, and look really presidential for Vice President Harris.
Thank you, Asad and Blair. You led me into my next question, actually. And clearly, we've seen that Kamala is imagined as a very strong candidate. And in recent years, we've seen strong female candidates for the White House. You mentioned some, Hillary Clinton, Nikki Haley, Elizabeth Warren. However, Clinton and Harris are the only two who made it to the final runoff. And according to Pew Research, white women who are often seen as swing voters broke nearly evenly in 2016, but favored Trump in 2020. How do you think this may affect Harris's campaign? And just very briefly, I'll give you 2 minutes or 3 minutes each. Yeah, you can go.
Doc,
you
you
Blake.
want to take it, Doc? Or you want
Yeah,
me to
sure.
jump?
Yeah, so I would say that, now, especially after watching the debate, I have a different answer. So I feel that, especially how Harris humanized abortion, I feel that she was really striking a chord in various scenarios that can affect women. And it's not just Black women, it's not just immigrant women, it's white women, it's all women. How with the discussing Project 2025 and talking about various plans to change if Trump gets in within the manifesto, and part of it having to do with completely making it illegal throughout the country to have an abortion, regardless of trimester and things of that nature. So I think that might affect the swing voter of white women, possibly. But as Brother Saad explained before, we're so polarized as a country. People have voted against their interests in the past. That goes back to slavery, of racialization and white people voting against their interests. So I could see that also continue to happen, with this election as well.
Listen, I just want to be clear. I would want to think that with everything that is on the line in this election for women, Black women, white women, women, it's the symbolism or the symbolic nature of having a woman president or female president. It is the issue of reproductive rights. But I have very little faith that white women will break for Harris. Now, we have seen some very some things that indicate something maybe differently, right? We had the White Women for Harris phone call that garnered, thousands and thousands of white women on the call. We had the white men for Harris, right? All started off with the Black Women for Harris call. But there's something in politics called the Bradley effect. All right. Name was Tom Bradley. He was the mayor of Los Angeles, and he was running for the governor of California. And he was leading in the polls up until they actually went into the polls to vote and pull the lever for him or his opponent. So what happened was that people were saying, I'm going to vote for Bradley. I'm going to vote for Bradley. I support him. But when they got into the privacy and the sequestered places of that voting booth, they voted for race, right? They voted for race. And I think, as Cabasso mentioned, in 2016, it was nearly even. But then in 2020, Trump still received the lion's share, I would say, or the majority share of white women voters of their vote. So I'm not too sure that come this year and in 2024 in November that the same enthusiasm that we see via social media, who is convincing us that there's this support from these different constituencies, I'm not sure that we will see those constituencies show up actually in the voting booth. I think that often race trumps gender. I don't want to talk about like the oppression Olympics and I understand intersectionality, But when it comes to these kind of electoral politics, we have seen over and over again that race trumps gender, race trumps class, race trumps socioeconomic status, race trumps good sense, right? Poor white people have more in common with the poor black folk in the ghetto than they do with a billionaire named Donald Trump. But he has convinced them that he is their voice, the voice of whiteness, and the voice of this first America, this older, whiter, Christian, wealthier America. And so they will vote. I don't know, Dr. Proctor, maybe you know the quote a little bit better than I do, but it's a quote by President Johnson. He says, if you can convince the lowest white man that he is better than the best black man, you don't have to pick his pocket. He'll reach in and give you. It was, I don't know it word for word, but it's a very telling quote to show that race will trump these other more important interests that the electorate should have. It's always about this feeling of belonging, this feeling of privilege, and even if you're poor and white, that comes with a privilege that makes you somewhat better than any other group of poor people, and they will vote for that privilege, voting rather than voting for their interest. And I think that white women will continue to do that. We'll see that trend continue in 2024.
Yeah, and I'll add real quickly that it's a cognitive dissonance, isn't it not? So, and we saw that to prove your point of when Obama was in office, how you can go from seeing a black family that represents the face of the nation, and then you go from that to a Trump era. Is that we can't have that again. And it does not matter in terms of his accolades, of his Harvard and Yale training, his wife's Yale training, Harvard training, of these are the upper echelon, if you will, of the Black elite, if you will. And to go from that to, which was earned, by the way, as opposed to going to, again, someone who's below mediocre and is only in power due to multi-generational wealth and white supremacy of his father.
Thank you. We have some questions in the chat. Please bear with me. I'll come to those in just a short while. I just want to finish this. I only have 2 questions left, and then we'll get to the questions in the chat. So you've mentioned Kamala is a graduate of an HBCU, and we also know that she's a member of the Divine Nine, the 5 fraternities and 4 sororities. She has strong ties to influential institutions within the Black community. How do these affiliations impact her campaign, and how would they influence her future political endeavors? Who wants to go first? Yeah.
Well, I think it. How do these affiliations impact the campaign? It is the mobilization. Once Vice President Harris was announced as Biden's replacement on the top of the ticket, you saw the impact and the power of these two institutions in the Black community, HBCUs and the Divine Nine. Much like we saw the activation of the Black church during Barack Obama's campaign. The Black church was the institution that pushed Barack Obama, that organized for him, people giving $5 and $10 and having, selling plates and suppers at the church to donate to his, to raise money to donate to his campaign. The Black church became activated during Obama's campaign. This time, it's these other institutions in the Black community, the HBCUs, which some can argue is just as strong as the Black church and maybe even more relevant in today's society. And then the Divine Nine, which comes out of the HBCU tradition. But it's organizations of Black professionals, individuals who have some access. Not all of us, I'm a member of the Divine Nine. Not all of us have access or wealth or money, but a lot of us are middle class, working decent jobs, and able to organize and network and support Kamala. So I think her affiliations with these institutions in the Black community, number one, it provides her with a certain level of validity. If you went to an HBCU, you know that experience. So she went to an HBCU, we know that experience. She knows how that experience shapes worldview and perception. HBCUs teach you to see things through not only a Black lens, but definitely with a Black lens. So multiple lenses that you can view the world with. The Divine Nine signals not only that you experience the HBCU, but it's like the platinum package of HBCU experience, right? You got your gold, silver, and your platinum package of the HBCU experience. So when you went to an HBCU and you've also been a member of the Divine Nine, you've had this full experience of Blackness. It's undeniable. So I think number two, voter mobilization and community activation. Once she was selected, these two institutions, the HBCUs and the Divine Nine, were activated. And you see it all over social media now, all over TikTok, all over Facebook. People who are not even a part of her organization, just who are part of the Divine Nine, are fully in support. You have Sigmas for Kamala, you have Kappas for Kamala, you have the Qs and the Deltas for Kamala. So, which is important because these people have a lot of these members of these organizations have prominence within their own communities, within their own families, within the churches and the neighborhoods. So Kamala is benefiting a lot from the history and the history of these institutions in Black America, which also, for those who are saying about policy, it's very important that as we are activated for her, that her policies need to be activated for us, right? That's the other part of this that I think the conversation has not really touched upon, that voting is transactional, right? We watch all of these podcasts and about these men versus women and what are you bringing to the table, right? Well, the Black community is saying, I'm bringing my HBCU to the table. I'm bringing my Divine Nine to the table. And these people have activated for you. So when you get into office, what type of policy will you activate that benefits us? And that's really the question. After all of this racial discussion that we have, the bottom line question is, what will your policies look like that will impact the lives of Black, poor, and working class people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just be short. I'll definitely echo everything that you said, Dr. Assad. It's kind of similar to how many were in our community, in our Black community, were disappointed with Obama. Was that similar type of, well, and as I said before, of this, of understanding that Obama is the president of the United States and not of Black America. And I think with Kamala, because of her strong networks with her sorority, with Howard University, and with the links, there's a lot of a certain class, right, of Black folk that also plays into the Democrat Party, which is usually for the middle class group. We never talk about the Black poor or the poor in general, right? So there's kind of, it's more than a tale of two cities. It's kind of a tale of three. It's the white Black binary, but then it's also the class binary as well. So, and it goes back to your point, Brother Assad, talking about policy. Okay, we're doing all of this, white dudes for Harris and white women for Harris and all this. So what will you do if you do become president? What will your policies look like? And especially when we talk about especially foreign policy, especially with Gaza, because you have a growing Black community that are very radical and that are supportive of Free Palestine, Free Gaza, even though there's always been a historical context of connections with Palestine. But, you know, due to, again, her relationship with her husband, who's a white Jewish man, you know, and looking at swing states like Michigan, where you have a huge Arab and Muslim population, particularly in Dearborn, which is a suburb of Detroit, you know, what we see coming up to this point, I will definitely affect her, I think, in the long run.
No, you bring up an excellent point, Dr. Proctor. I just want to jump here and mention that as we talk about last night's debate, right? I think that was one of the places where she has room for improvement.
Yes.
In her responses towards the Gaza, Israel and Gaza conflict, the genocide in Gaza, right? There was an opportunity in the debate last night where she could have been a lot stronger on the issue, and in particular on the side of the people of Gaza. But again, she is not so I want to be clear. Early on, I said that there are two Americas. That there's the one that's older, whiter, wealthier, Christian, and then there is one that is browner, liberal, poorer, and they have a different vision of the world. And that Harris is attempting to speak to that second America, but she still represents the establishment of the other America, and that other America is pro-Israel. That other America is pro our allies in the Middle East, and that's Israel. The other America, it's a bipartisan thing, right? Between Democrats and Republicans. We're going to send money to Israel. We're going to support Israel. But the America that Harris is attempting to speak to is pro-liberation of the people of Palestine, right? So during yesterday, to be stronger, to speak to that America, that second America, more loudly and more resoundingly, and quite frankly, she failed. She said I will always, and she doubled back. She said, I want to be clear. I will always support Israel and our allies. And at that point, millions of people across Dearborn, Michigan, across these swing states who led those non-committed campaigns, their ears turned off. So that was an opportunity that she missed.
Yeah, because that should have been her of how she is able to divide herself from Joe Biden. And I definitely agree with that she failed with that.
Thank you. You've actually addressed my next question, but I'll still ask it anyway so that we can just unpack it a little more. But just in very, 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 before I get to the questions in the chat, you've mentioned the support that she's received from the HBCU. The divine policy and the issues that are going on, the Israeli war and stuff. How do you think that this support that she has received will affect that part of her identity as well as the campaign strategy? Sadia, on mute.
Oh, I apologize. I think I was having trouble hearing the question, but I think I got most of it.
Should I repeat?
No, okay. I think
apologies. Maybe my network became
got most of it. And I think we kind of touched on it. Hopefully, there is some. If she is elected, there is some reciprocity. I love that word because it first heard it when Lauryn Hill sang it. But hopefully there's some reciprocity if she is elected, that we can see the funding of HBCUs. Right now, there are HBCUs across the country that are owed $13 billion in payment from state governments who robbed them since the end of slavery and the beginning of Reconstruction. There are billions of dollars owed to HBCUs. We wonder why they're underfunded. They're underfunded because they have been robbed, and it's $13 billion out there. I think the Divine Nine can, it's not necessarily a lot that she can do with the Divine Nine, but there are programs that these organizations create, clothing drives and food drives and all of these kind of community programs that should see the type of grant funding from the government if we have a Harris administration. But more importantly, it must be these organizations are members of the Black community, institutions within the Black community. So that we're looking for reciprocity, right? If we're going to go out and vote 80 and 90% for one candidate, we need to see reciprocity. We need to see what you are bringing to the table. And I think over the next month or so, we're going to see more questions. I think we've had a honeymoon period. There was this level of excitement when she was selected to be at the top of the ticket, but now we're going to have some hard questions, right? What are your policies on the plethora of issues impacting Black America? And we cannot let anyone, Trump, Obama, or Harris, slide with the idea that I'm going to create policies for all Americans that will positively impact Black Americans. Black Americans have a specific condition that requires a specific prescription. Dr. Michael Eric Dyson once described it this way. When you go to the emergency room, you may see someone in there with a broken finger, someone is there with a gunshot wound, and someone is there with chemotherapy. All of those three different ailments require very different attention and expertise. You cannot write a prescription. You can't put a cast on cancer, and you cannot write a prescription for that bullet wound. So what we need is a very specific prescription from Harris. During Obama's administration, he mentioned rising tides lifts all boats. We got drowned out, right, by those big boats that were rising with the tide. So we want to make sure that she has a prescription for it. So as these institutions are supporting her, the next question is, how will you support us?
And I'll be very quick and short. I'll just say it 3 times: reparations, reparations, reparations. That is something that really needs to be addressed, and something that needs to be not just a state by state project, but a federally mandated one.
Thank you, Assad and Blair. If you allow me, let me move to the questions in the chat. I'll start with the first question I see. I think it's from Fitness Rigger. We want to hear the reasons why people are planning to vote for Kamala, because it doesn't make sense. And then the next one, I'll take 2, and then you can respond one after the other. How critical, Dr. Assad, how critical do you see the impact of a Trump versus Harris administration, especially as it relates to partnering to do business in Africa? So you can go first, Assad, but also there's that first question on why people want to vote for Kamala and Harris. You can touch on both, and then we have Blair in just under 3 minutes each.
Yeah, I don't. People are voting for Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, for a number of reasons. It may be her policy position on reproductive rights. It may be her position on Israel, or the war in Ukraine, or it may be her position on taxing the rich and giving tax credits to the middle class. I'm not sure why everyone is choosing to vote for, or why those who are choosing to vote for Harris, whether there are specific reasons for voting for Harris or the specific reasons for voting for Donald Trump. Some people are voting for Harris simply because they don't want to support Donald Trump. And that's a legitimate reason. That is a legitimate reason to support someone else, right? I think this candidate may be dangerous. I think this candidate may cause serious problems to democracy and impact it in ways that may be irreparable. So they're saying, I'll vote for Harris. And they may not be happy with all of Harris's policies. They may hold their nose when they go into that voting booth to support her. The second question is, I think history is pretty clear. Democratic governors have always, I mean, Democratic administrations have typically been better for the African continent. I want to add a caveat to that though. All administrations are going to operate on the interests of the American empire. We should never forget that. So whether it's Democrat or Republican, whether it's Harris or Trump, they will operate on the interests of the American empire. It just so happens that with Democrats, their policies have impacted Africa in ways that have been more favorable. But there are also policies that continue to create and perpetuate inequality and poverty throughout the continent. So I don't want to assume that a Harris election will somehow somehow contribute to a wealthier, more prosperous continent. It'll continue it'll continue American imperialism, but maybe not as harsh or as brutal as a Trump administration or a Republican administration. So those are my thoughts. I don't know, Doc, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I said if Harris comes into office, I mean, it's just going to maintain status quo. I mean, it's not going to. I mean, she's not a radical. She's a liberal. So, and also, why will voters, cast their ballot for Kamala? I agree with Assad that it's for many reasons, and I would say many would definitely be because they're anti-Trump and don't want Trump to come back into office. And other reasons why that. This is what I'll always say is that in terms of voting, it's about being strategic. It's not necessarily voting for someone that you like, but it's voting for someone that will try to affect policy in the best way, and not to veer from that, especially if Trump comes in with Project 2025.
Well, we noticed that Trump tried to distance himself from Project 2025. And see, the thing about it is that everyone's not going to go and investigate. But the Heritage Foundation, the Heritage Foundation was one of the sponsors of the Republican National Convention and the individuals who published Project 2025. It is hard to separate and say you don't know anything about that when they just paid for your multi-million-dollar week-long pep rally, right? So the Project 2025 thing, I think is very serious, and that may be a reason why people are voting for Kamala Harris, because in the details of that Project 2025, there's some things that are very, very scary. I don't know if people have read it. And there are some things that are extremely scary. Sending National Guard troops from red states into blue states, right? As occupying forces, right? So if you live in a city and you're African American and you live in New Orleans like I did, or you live in Detroit, or you live in Atlanta, imagine having troops from Mississippi, right, in your city, occupying. That's very serious. That's in Project 2025. Ending like the Department of Education. That's in Project 2025. Who wants an uneducated American populace with 300 million guns? I think we need to keep the Department of Education. Right. So there are some things that are in Project 2025 that have people saying, I may not agree with Harris on Palestine and Israel. I definitely don't. Right. I believe in the liberation of the Palestinian people. Right. But Harris, but voting for Harris, and I'm not saying who I'm voting for, but if I were to vote for Harris, a legitimate reason is because Project 2025 is very scary.
Yeah, and I'll just add quickly, another part of the manifesto of Project 2025 is for governmental workers, is that they would have to basically uh, do an oath to Trump to maintain their position within the government, whether we're talking about state, federal, county, and the type of employment. And also, I think people need to understand that the Heritage Foundation was founded in 1973. So we're talking about an over 50-year manifesto plan that has been around for a very long time. It didn't just start like 2 weeks ago or like a month ago.
Are there any more questions in the chat?
Okay. Thank you. You can respond to both. Yes. So Susie asks, the more important question right now, in my opinion, is stopping or at minimum slowing the clock to roll back time and put us in a deeper state of oppression. I think this is a comment, but you can comment on that too. And then the next one is the migrant crisis is the guideline to how to vote, especially for Black Americans. So I should comment on both those comments, if you have anything to say.
So the rolling back time one, I'm not too sure how to respond to that, because I don't think any, let me say this. It is the responsibility of the people, Black, white, or whomever, right, to guard their own future. We cannot place that responsibility in the hands of any politician, any elected official. The elected official is there to control, to maintain empire, in my opinion. The second question about the immigration crisis is it's a very tricky one, because Trump attempted to use the idea of Black jobs, right? And there's a lot of discussion around this, but there's a real reality that must be addressed. The people in Chicago, right, where Dr. Proctor is from, they see the immigrants in their community, these migrants, right, these people who have crossed the border, because places like Texas with the governor of Texas, I forget his name, sending individuals who are crossing the border, putting them on buses and dropping them off in DC, dropping them off in New York, dropping them off in Chicago, right, into these sanctuary cities. And many Black Americans in those cities, in particular Chicago, right, who are seeing these immigrants or these migrants who are now getting all sorts of government assistance. There are schools that were closed in Chicago that have now been that were in Black communities that are now being used to house and warehouse. That's not a great language. These are people, but to house these migrants. They hear about the government money that is going to support them while they are here, and while they make their bid for legalization. And that is fine. I support that. I want legal immigration, and for people to go through the legal pathways. But for poor Black Americans in Chicago, for poor Black Americans in Baltimore and in New York and these other cities that have received busloads of immigrants, they're saying, well, where's our stuff? To keep it plain and simple, right? Where are you getting all of this money to support these people? And we need support ourselves, right? You have veterans who are homeless in America, who are sleeping on corners sleeping on street corners every night. And we have now found money to support those who are not, those are our tax dollars being put to work for people, and we're not benefiting. So that is a very serious concern for people, and it puts Black Americans, Black voters in a very precarious position, because is that enough to say I can't support Harris, that I need to support Trump? That's right. So when you decide to support Trump, what are the other things that you're supporting? When you support Harris because of reproductive rights, what are the other things you're supporting? And that's why Dr. Proctor said there's no perfect candidate. No candidate is going to check all of the boxes. You have to decide, you have to create a hierarchy of the priorities for for yourself. If it's Israel and Palestine is at the top of your list, is it reparations at the top of mine? Right? Well, that's going to get your support. You create your 1, 2, 3 hierarchies, and then you vote your interests.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll just add on that this is where it comes to, macro versus micro, right? So you can't expect your vote for the president and not vote in your local constituency if you don't know who your local um, alderman, mayor, things of that nature. So I think it's important of understanding both the micro and the macro.
Thank you. The next question, do you think that after last night's debate and the embarrassing statements and performance of Trump, that he will lose supporters?
I don't think so. I think that, as we said before, I think it's, it was a tale of two different Americas. It's very polarized, and folks who are going to be the Trump meisters, they're gonna maintain their support for Trump regardless. And so I don't see uh, f- folks that are 100% or that are have always been wanting to support Trump now veering to vote for Kamala. I don't see that.
No, he didn't lose. Trump, Trump can say what he likes all the time. I mean, this is the same person who grabbed him by the right. I don't think we are living in the age of political convention anymore. It is a new ball game, and Trump created an entirely new playbook to where to where statements that would be considered outlandish, statements that would have gotten George W. Bush impeached and put out of the White House and ostracized from the Republican community. And those days are gone. Trump is a new type of candidate, and I think that is also the which is pretty scary. I mean, obviously he was defeated in 2020, um, but he is an unorthodox candidate. He does things very differently, and he has staunch support. Right? We can get caught up in social media and our echo chamber and our timeline and think that so many people have swayed towards Kamala. Trump has the heart of America, right? Kamala's support comes from the coastal cities and the black and brown cities in the South. But there's large swaths of America, your Dakotas, your Wyoming, all of these places in the heartland of America belong to Trump, right? So I don't think there is much that he can say that will have those individuals say, "Oh no, I won't vote for him." It will take a lot more of other Republicans coming out, like other Republican elected officials coming out saying, "Hey, I think I'm going to support Kamala here because Trump." If you get a significant wave of that, which is some of it has started, but if you get a significant wave of that, I think those people can be the voices that can sway people away from Trump. But I don't think it's anything that Trump can say that will sway people away from him.
Got it. The next question is from Valerie. Do you think that the largely two-party system in the US racializes politics? If it was a multi-party democracy, would race still play such a big role in who would be a presidential candidate or who votes for them? Or is the US itself too racialized regardless?
Well, you do have the Green Party, but that's always been a very, I call it independent light. So if you really don't want to be Democrat, and if you're a little bit more radical, there have been folks that have supported the Green Party. So there are more so it's not just the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. However, those are the two dominant factions, if you will. So I don't know if there was like a multiple of, like, say, there was a 5-party or 6-party system, I think there would still be that division amongst racial lines, even within that.
Yeah.
Folks who are more radical. You have radical whites that are part of the left. You have radical blacks that are part of the left, but there still might be racist. You see what I'm saying? So,
Right.
so I don't, because of the racial landscape of the United States of America and the historical context of the United States of America, that we still, and when I mean we, I'm talking about as the country, have not dealt with. That we still, it's still seen as the land of opportunity. It's the land of the immigrant. It's the Captain Save-'em of the world. And it's it's not one of the settler colonial countries, just like Australia, just like Latin America, just like South Africa, just like Brazil, just like other parts of the world. So, so I don't know. I don't think that would make a difference.
Well, I think before we could actually reshape, because we actually have multi-parties, right? We had, as Doc mentioned, we had the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, the Reform Party, right? But what those parties don't have is money, right? So much of American politics is about fundraising and donation and this dark money, Citizens United money, all of this money coming from corporations and people and institutions that are not actually people, right? So, so if you're in a small third party that has a specific interest for Black Americans, Black, brown, and working class white people, if you created the Black, brown, working class white people party, how are you going to get on TV for the campaign ad, right? You have to raise, right now, I think we're hitting, I don't know, something just outrageous, in terms of how much money is being spent on presidential campaigns, raising 80 million in one night, 300 million over this amount of time. If you don't have access to that type of capital, you can have whatever party you want. And let me be very clear. The power of the people will always outweigh the people in power. But it's a very hard task when you don't have that type of money to get into electoral politics. But the people, united, could never be defeated. That's right. That's what we used to say in the 60s. The people united can never be defeated, right? So there is a possibility that a small party could make that noise, but the harsh reality is that money influences and controls American politics. Capital controls American politics, and if you're not if you're not in one of these big parties, the Republican or the Democrat, your voice, your message will just simply won't be heard, even if it's the perfect message for every American.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Is there anyone who has another question? Even amongst us here before we end. My own reflection is just how race seemingly plays a significant role in both the US and, if I have to compare, South African elections, though of course the dynamics differ because of the different histories. But I think that race is something that we see continuously playing a role in the elections. I mean, for South Africa, obviously it's because of the history with apartheid and how that whole played out. But most importantly, I think in both contexts, it's the fact that race or racial identity is used as a proxy for, dealing with issues of inequality, disadvantaged communities. And in this case, I would like to argue the majority in the US, the Black community, and rather the minority, Black community, and the majority in South Africa, the Black community. Yeah. I mean, if we don't have any questions, I would like to not keep you here for too long, but I want to say that, like I mentioned before, this is just the first in the webinar of series that we'll be hosting here at Access to, unpack the implications of the US elections for Africa, be it a Trump presidency or Harris presidency. So we'll be having this series weekly, every Wednesday, and our next one is next week? Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yeah,
think there's a question.
the question.
Oh, there is a question.
Yes.
Okay, okay, sorry, my apologies for that. My apologies. I've only seen this now, I didn't see it. That was in response to the other brother in the panel. Thank you both for your responses. Okay, sorry, Mike Abrahams. Good day. I had recently seen a comment by Dr. Didi Curtis highlighting that Kamala Harris does not need to play the black card to Black people in the US in her campaign. Her concerns are, what can she deliver?
That's true. That's absolutely true. What can she deliver? And that's what we want to know, right? I think listen, we're multifaceted people. We can still have the desire and hope to see a Black female president, right? I know that Black women and black and brown women and little girls all over the world, if she was elected, they will dream deeper, more profoundly, and bigger than they have ever dreamed before. That's a real impact. I know we say it's symbolism, right? But symbolism can have real impact, right? My children who were born 2010 and 2012 only knew a world where they had a Black president for the first few years of their lives. It can have significant impact, right? But voting is transactional. What are the policies that you're going to create for me, Vice President Harris or former President Trump? See, I think we get caught, right, in this, like, because she's the Black candidate, she has to produce the Black policy. And there's a reason for that. But also, I need to know what both of you candidates plan to do for my community, if you want our vote, right? So that goes for the presidential election. It goes for your gubernatorial elections, all the way down to your mayors and your city councils. The question should always be, that was presented to us by the great philosophical musician Janet Jackson, in these words: "What have you done for me lately?" That's politics. What have you done for me lately? So if I vote for you, every time I see you come in my community, every time I see you come on TV, I'm asking you the same question: what have you done for me lately? And if you have the right answers, next time I see you, next time you're asking for my vote, I'll vote for you.
Yeah, and I'll just say that, yes, I agree, especially when you talk about the Black card. I don't care if you put hot sauce on your collard greens, if you eat macaroni and neck bones, macaroni and cheese, or I don't care if you participate in the electric slide. I don't care if you go to church every Sunday. I really do not care if you like neo soul. Echoing what Brother Assad is saying is, like, what policies are you going to produce? And of course, I understand that you're the president. You still have Congress. It's not just the president. Not Sometimes we get fixated on that as well. It's more than just the president. So it's also understanding, again, as I said before, who is in your local constituency, within your place of residency. So I definitely agree with that. It's what will you do to serve the public?
Thank you. I think just making sure we have no other questions. Before I close, do you have any last remarks, Assad and Bey? None? Any concluding remarks on this issue of race and identity and politics?
Yeah, all I can say is just make sure your vote counts.
I think you said it all. Everybody, if you are watching from the US, make sure you go and vote for the candidate of your choice, right? And then my reminder is that once you finish voting, that's when the work actually starts. Voting is only a tool in the toolkit of democracy and liberation for poor, Black, brown, working class, whites, and oppressed groups. Again, I believe in the power of the people. So whomever you vote for, know the next day you still need to get out there and organize. You still need to work. Babies still need to be fed. Schools still need to be built. You know, single mothers still need some assistance. So you make sure that you're doing everything you can in your community to ameliorate the concerns of poor Black, brown, and white working class people.
Yeah, and I would just add that, voting is only one aspect of work for wanting self-determination. That it goes back to what are you doing in your community? How are you serving in your community? So I think it's a both and.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I was mentioning that this is the first of many weekly series that we'll be hosting here at Access, just to unpack and discuss the implications of either a Trump or Harris presidency, mostly for the continent. But we will share more details on our social media pages on LinkedIn. And our next one is next week, Wednesday, around the same time. And the next week we'll be discussing perspectives from sororities and fraternities. So we'd be very glad for you to join us again, and so that we can continue to, unpack these conversations and just continue to learn and exchange ideas. I just want to thank you on behalf of Access and on behalf of my panelists, Asad and Blair. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today and to help us unpack these issues. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope that you join us next week and every other week after that until the elections. Yeah. Thank you so much, colleagues, and have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you. Bye-bye.